What if I told you that Pinocchio isn't just a children's story, but a 140-year evolution of humanity's most important spiritual teaching, hidden in plain sight across multiple adaptations that reveal how our understanding of consciousness, truth, and transformation has changed over time? I'm about to take you deeper into the shadows than most film analysts dare to go. While other channels give you surface-level analysis about Disney magic and childhood nostalgia, Occult cinema reveals the genuine esoteric knowledge that storytellers embed in their work. Just like Pinocchio transformed from wooden puppet to real boy through trials and spiritual awakening, you're about to discover how this tale has evolved to carry authentic occult teachings about consciousness, divine creation, and the journey from artificial existence to genuine spiritual life. These are 10 shocking occult secrets hidden across every version of Pinocchio that will completely change how you understand this timeless story of transformation. Secret number 1, the pineal gland. The name Pinocchio isn't just a cute Italian diminutive. It's a coded reference to the pineal gland, the mysterious third eye that mystics have identified as the seat of spiritual consciousness for thousands of years. Break down the name and you get Pino, which means pine in Italian, combined with Occhio, which means eye. So Pinocchio literally translates to pine eye, a direct reference to the pineal gland, which is shaped like a tiny pine cone and sits right in the center of your brain. Carlo Collodi, who wrote the original story in 1883, was deeply influenced by esoteric traditions that taught the pineal gland was humanity's dormant spiritual organ. When activated, this gland allows perception of higher dimensions and direct communication with divine consciousness. But here's what's incredible. Every major adaptation has preserved this hidden meaning while adapting it to their era's understanding. Disney's 1940 version shows Pinocchio's consciousness awakening through moral choices. Guillermo del Toro's 2022 version makes the spiritual symbolism explicit, showing Pinocchio's wooden head literally opening like a pine cone to reveal inner light. The wooden puppet represents what mystics call the artificial self, the ego consciousness that most humans mistake for their true identity. Pinocchio's journey to become a real boy is actually the process of activating the pineal gland and awakening to authentic spiritual consciousness. Ancient Egyptian texts describe the pineal gland as the eye of Horus, the spiritual organ that allows perception of divine realms. Hindu tradition calls it the Ajna chakra, the third eye center that governs psychic sight and spiritual wisdom. The most profound aspect is that Pinocchio's transformation from wood to flesh represents the alchemical process of transmuting base matter into spiritual gold, the awakening of divine consciousness within material form. Secret number 2, Geppetto. Geppetto isn't just a kindly woodcarver. He represents what Gnostic Christians called the demiurge, the lesser creator god who fashions life from dead matter but cannot grant true spiritual consciousness. In Collodi's original 1883 story, Geppetto is a poor craftsman who carves Pinocchio from a piece of wood that already has a voice. He can create the physical form, but he cannot give it a soul. That requires intervention from higher spiritual forces represented by the Blue Fairy. Disney's 1940 version transforms Geppetto into a loving father figure whose wish is granted by divine intervention, but the core teaching remains the same. Material creation requires spiritual animation to become truly alive. But here's what's really profound. Del Toro's 2022 version shows Geppetto as a grieving father trying to replace his dead son Carlo by carving a wooden replica. This reveals the deeper Gnostic teaching that the demiurge creates out of loss and longing, trying to fill spiritual emptiness through material means. In Gnostic cosmology, the demiurge believes he is the supreme creator, but he's actually working with pre-existing spiritual essence that comes from the true divine source. Geppetto carves Pinocchio, but the wood already contains the spark of consciousness that will eventually awaken. Each version shows the limitations of purely material creation. Geppetto can craft the perfect physical form, but without the Blue Fairy's intervention, Pinocchio remains just an animated puppet rather than a truly conscious being. The most incredible insight is that Geppetto's love for his creation mirrors the demiurge's genuine care for humanity, even though his creative power is limited compared to the ultimate divine source. Secret number 3, the Blue Fairy. The Blue Fairy who brings Pinocchio to life isn't just a magical helper, she's the Gnostic Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom that bridges the gap between material creation and spiritual consciousness. In Collodi's original story, she appears as a mysterious girl with turquoise hair who dies and resurrects multiple times, demonstrating the eternal nature of divine wisdom that transcends physical death. Her blue color connects to the throat chakra and the element of ether, the spiritual substance that animates matter. Disney's 1940 version transforms her into a benevolent mother figure who grants Geppetto's wish, but preserves her role as the divine feminine who can accomplish what masculine creative power cannot, the gift of genuine spiritual life. But here's what's really incredible. Del Toro's 2022 version reveals her true nature most clearly. She appears as the wood sprite with eyes covering her wings, directly referencing the biblical seraphim, the highest order of angels who surround the divine throne and see all of creation simultaneously. In Gnostic teaching, Sophia is the divine wisdom who fell from the highest spiritual realms to become trapped in matter, but who works constantly to awaken the divine sparks imprisoned in material forms. The Blue Fairy's mission to help Pinocchio become real mirrors Sophia's work to awaken human consciousness. Her blue color is significant across all traditions. It represents the divine feminine principle that bridges heaven and earth, spirit and matter, consciousness and form. In Hindu tradition, blue is associated with Krishna and Vishnu, the divine consciousness that pervades all existence. The way she appears and disappears throughout the story demonstrates what mystics call divine grace, spiritual assistance that comes from beyond the material world but works through natural processes to accomplish transformation. The most profound aspect is that she doesn't force Pinocchio's transformation. She provides the initial spark of life and then guides him through experiences that allow his consciousness to develop naturally. Secret number 4. The nose. Pinocchio's growing nose when he lies isn't just a moral lesson. It's demonstrating authentic magical principles about how spiritual contamination manifests physically when consciousness is corrupted by falsehood. In Collodi's original story, the nose growing only happens twice, and it represents what occultists call spiritual contamination, the way that lies and deception literally poison the energy body and manifest as physical distortions. Ancient Egyptian texts describe similar phenomena where spiritual impurity would manifest as physical deformities or illnesses. The growing nose represents the way that falsehood distorts the spiritual body, making it impossible to maintain normal human appearance. But here's what's fascinating. Each adaptation handles this differently, revealing how our understanding of truth has evolved. Disney's 1940 version makes it a consistent moral mechanism, teaching children that lies have immediate consequences. Del Toro's 2022 version barely uses the growing nose at all, suggesting that truth is more complex than simple honesty versus lies. In his version, Pinocchio's innocence and authenticity matter more than factual accuracy. The nose specifically is significant because in occult anatomy, it corresponds to the sense of discrimination, the ability to distinguish between truth and falsehood, pure and impure, beneficial and harmful influences. In Hindu tradition, the nose is associated with the Manipura chakra, which governs personal power and the ability to manifest intentions in the physical world. When this chakra is corrupted by deception, it creates distortions in physical manifestation. The most profound teaching is that lies don't just hurt others, they literally deform the liar's spiritual body, making it impossible to maintain authentic connection with divine consciousness until the contamination is cleansed. Secret number 5. The alchemical stages. Pinocchio's journey from puppet to real boy follows the exact 3-stage process that medieval alchemists used to transmute base metals into spiritual gold: nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. In Collodi's original story, Pinocchio undergoes nigredo, blackening, when he's hanged by assassins and appears to die. This represents the death of the ego that must occur before spiritual transformation can begin. The albedo, whitening stage occurs when the blue fairy resurrects him and he begins learning moral lessons through painful experiences. This is the purification phase where spiritual impurities are burned away through trials and suffering. The final rubedo, reddening, stage happens when Pinocchio sacrifices himself to save Geppetto from the terrible dogfish, demonstrating the selfless love that completes the alchemical transformation into spiritual gold. But here's what's incredible. Each adaptation emphasizes different aspects of this process. Disney's 1940 version focuses on the moral purification, showing how Pinocchio learns to choose truth, bravery, and unselfishness. Del Toro's 2022 version shows multiple death and rebirth cycles, emphasizing that spiritual transformation isn't a single event, but an ongoing process of dying to old patterns and being reborn into higher consciousness. The alchemical process requires what medieval texts call the union of opposites, integrating masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, material and spiritual aspects of existence. Pinocchio achieves this by balancing his innocent nature with learned wisdom. The workshop, the various adventures, and the final underwater rescue all represent different stages of the alchemical laboratory where consciousness is systematically refined and purified. The most profound aspect is that the transformation isn't just individual. Pinocchio's awakening also transforms Geppetto, showing how spiritual development affects everyone in the Seeker's circle. Secret number 6. Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island, called Toyland in Collodi's original, isn't just a cautionary tale about hedonism. It's showing how authentic spiritual initiation gets corrupted into false teachings that trap souls in lower states of consciousness. In the original story, boys are lured to Toyland with promises of endless play and no responsibilities. But instead of spiritual freedom, they are transformed into donkeys, representing the regression from human consciousness to animal instinct. This mirrors what happens in corrupted mystery schools, where seekers are promised easy enlightenment, but are actually being prepared for spiritual enslavement. The transformation into donkeys represents devolution, consciousness moving backward instead of forward. But here's what's really disturbing. Disney's 1940 version preserves this teaching while making it more accessible. Pleasure Island offers everything that appeals to childish desires, but it's actually a trap that turns children into beasts of burden. Del Toro's 2022 version updates this for modern times by showing fascist youth camps where children are indoctrinated into political ideology instead of developing authentic spiritual consciousness. The message remains the same. False teachers promise freedom but deliver slavery. The coachman who runs Pleasure Island represents what Gnostic texts call the false prophet, someone who appears to offer spiritual liberation but is actually harvesting souls for darker purposes. The fact that the boys grow donkey ears and tails before fully transforming shows how spiritual corruption happens gradually. People don't realize they're losing their humanity until the process is nearly complete. The most chilling aspect is that some boys escape before full transformation, but they're permanently marked by their experience. This represents how exposure to corrupted spiritual teachings leaves lasting damage even when people eventually escape. Secret number 7. The Whale. The encounter with the giant sea creature that swallows Geppetto isn't just an adventure. It's the classical catabasis, the descent into the underworld that heroes must make to retrieve lost souls and complete their spiritual initiation. In Collodi's original, the terrible dogfish is a massive sea monster whose belly contains the wreckage of ships and the bones of countless victims. Pinocchio must enter this realm of death to rescue his father and prove his worthiness for transformation. This follows the exact pattern of mythological underworld journeys like Orpheus rescuing Eurydice, Inanna's descent to the underworld, and Christ's harrowing of hell. The hero must face death directly to gain the power to restore life. But here's what's incredible. Each adaptation updates this archetypal journey for its era. Disney's 1940 version transforms the dogfish into Monstro the Whale, emphasizing the biblical Jonah story and the theme of redemption through sacrifice. Del Toro's 2022 version creates a mechanical sea monster filled with naval mines, representing how modern warfare has become the underworld that swallows fathers and sons. Pinocchio's journey becomes a meditation on how war destroys families and communities. The belly of the beast represents what is called the dark night of the soul, the period of spiritual testing where everything familiar is stripped away and the seeker must rely entirely on inner spiritual resources. The fire that Pinocchio builds inside the creature's belly represents the divine spark that can illuminate even the darkest spiritual territories. This inner light is what allows him to find Geppetto and guide them both back to the surface. The most profound teaching is that the underworld journey isn't optional. Every soul must eventually face the realm of death and dissolution to achieve genuine spiritual rebirth. Secret number 8. Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket isn't just Pinocchio's conscience. He represents the higher self, the divine aspect of consciousness that guides the soul through its spiritual development. In Collodi's original story, the talking cricket appears briefly to warn Pinocchio about the dangers ahead, but Pinocchio kills him with a hammer. The cricket then returns as a ghost, showing that the higher self cannot be destroyed even when the ego tries to silence its guidance. Disney's 1940 version transforms him into Jiminy Cricket, and those initials JC aren't coincidental. He represents the Christ consciousness, the divine wisdom that serves as guide and protector throughout the spiritual journey. But here's what's really profound. Del Toro's 2022 version calls him Sebastian J. Cricket and makes him the narrator of the entire story. This reveals his true role as the witness consciousness that observes and records the soul's journey through incarnation. The cricket's small size represents how the voice of spiritual wisdom often seems insignificant compared to the loud demands of ego consciousness and worldly desires. Most people ignore or try to silence this inner guidance. His ability to appear and disappear throughout the story demonstrates what mystics call divine grace, spiritual assistance that comes when needed but cannot be commanded or controlled by the ego. The fact that he's appointed as Pinocchio's official conscience by the Blue Fairy shows that spiritual guidance is a divine gift, not something that can be earned or achieved through personal effort alone. The most incredible aspect is that Jiminy's own character development parallels Pinocchio's journey. He starts as an imperfect guide who makes mistakes, showing that even divine wisdom must work through limited forms to reach human consciousness. Secret number 9. The real boy transformation. Pinocchio's final transformation from puppet to real boy isn't just a happy ending. It's demonstrating the ultimate goal of all spiritual traditions, the awakening from artificial existence to authentic divine consciousness. In Collodi's original story, Pinocchio becomes flesh and blood only after proving his moral development through work, sacrifice, and care for others. He earns his humanity through spiritual labor and selfless service. The transformation happens while he sleeps, showing that spiritual awakening often occurs during states of consciousness where the ego is quiet and divine grace can work without interference. But here's what's fascinating. Each adaptation reveals different aspects of this awakening. Disney's 1940 version emphasizes that the transformation is a reward for demonstrating bravery, truth, and unselfishness, the 3 cardinal virtues of spiritual development. Del Toro's 2022 version takes a radically different approach. Pinocchio remains wooden, but gains acceptance and love exactly as he is. This represents the modern understanding that spiritual awakening isn't about changing what you are, but accepting your authentic nature. The real boy state represents what Hindu philosophy calls Jivan Mukta, liberation while living. The person appears to be an ordinary human being, but their consciousness has awakened to its divine nature. The physical transformation from wood to flesh symbolizes the alchemical teaching that spiritual development eventually manifests as changes in the physical body and energy field. The most profound insight is that becoming real isn't about conforming to external standards of humanity. It's about awakening to the divine consciousness that was always present but hidden beneath layers of conditioning and artificial identity. Secret number 10. Each era's version reflects its spiritual crisis. The evolution of Pinocchio adaptations over 140 years reveals how each generation has faced different spiritual challenges and needed different aspects of the ancient wisdom to address their particular crisis. Collodi's 1883 original emerged during the Industrial Revolution when traditional rural life was being destroyed by mechanization. His version emphasizes work ethic, moral discipline, and the dangers of seeking pleasure without responsibility, exactly what people needed to maintain their humanity in an increasingly mechanized world. Disney's 1940 version appeared during World War II when people desperately needed hope and the belief that wishes could come true. The sanitized, optimistic version provided spiritual comfort during humanity's darkest hour, emphasizing that goodness would ultimately triumph over evil. But here's what's really incredible. Del Toro's 2022 version addresses our current spiritual crisis, the rise of fascism, the rejection of truth, and the need to accept imperfection in ourselves and others. His Pinocchio remains wooden, but finds love and acceptance, teaching that authenticity matters more than conformity. Each era's version also reflects that generation's understanding of consciousness and spiritual development. Collodi's version is moralistic and punitive. Disney's is optimistic and reward-based. Del Toro's is complex and accepting of ambiguity. The story's ability to adapt while preserving its core spiritual teachings demonstrates what mystics call the perennial philosophy, the recognition that divine truth expresses itself differently in each age while remaining essentially unchanged. The evolution from Collodi's harsh moral lessons to Disney's wish fulfillment to Del Toro's acceptance of imperfection shows humanity's growing understanding of how spiritual transformation actually works. The most profound revelation is that Pinocchio isn't just a story. It's a living spiritual teaching that continues to evolve as human consciousness develops, always providing exactly the wisdom that each generation needs for its particular challenges. Now you understand why Pinocchio has endured for nearly 150 years and continues to be retold by each generation's greatest storytellers. It's not just a children's tale, it's one of the most complete guides to spiritual transformation ever created, disguised as entertainment but containing authentic occult knowledge about consciousness, divine creation, and the journey from artificial existence to genuine spiritual life. The story's evolution across different adaptations reveals something even more profound: how human understanding of spiritual development has grown more sophisticated over time. We've moved from simple moral lessons to complex psychological insights, from punishment-based learning to acceptance-based transformation. Carlo Collodi embedded authentic esoteric teachings in his original story, drawing from Gnostic Christianity, alchemical traditions, and Italian folk magic. Each subsequent adaptation has preserved these core teachings while translating them for new audiences and new spiritual challenges. Most importantly, the story shows that spiritual awakening isn't a destination but a process, one that requires courage, wisdom, and the willingness to face difficult truths about ourselves and our world. Pinocchio's journey from wooden puppet to real boy mirrors every soul's journey from unconscious existence to divine awareness. This is why the story continues to resonate across cultures and generations. It speaks to the universal human longing to become real, to awaken from the artificial existence of ego consciousness and discover our authentic divine nature. The question isn't whether spiritual transformation is possible. The question is whether you're ready to begin the journey from puppet to real boy, from artificial existence to authentic spiritual life. What other classic stories do you think contain hidden spiritual teachings that have evolved across different adaptations? Have you noticed how your own understanding of these tales has deepened as you've grown spiritually? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm always looking for new evidence of how ancient wisdom continues to guide human consciousness. And if this video opened your mind to new possibilities about how spiritual teachings are preserved and transmitted through popular culture, then you need to subscribe to Occult Cinema right now. I'm constantly discovering how the greatest stories of all time contain authentic occult knowledge that can guide your own spiritual development. The ancient wisdom never disappeared. It just learned to hide itself in the stories we tell our children. And the most incredible part? The spiritual guidance you need for your own transformation might be waiting for you in the very tales that shaped your earliest understanding of what it means to become truly human.